As it gets hotter around here, there are days when I just don't feel like eating anything too heavy. But I'm still hungry, I want a satisfying dinner. That's when I turn to my Meatless Monday stash of meals in jars. Today's video is a compilation of 5 of my favorite meatless meals. They are heavy on vegetables and absolutely bursting with flavor. Just FYI, Drew and I do eat soup year-round, especially as we get older, so several of these are soup recipes. I'm going to share with you my vegetable soup recipe. It's really a soup base that can be turned into 3 different types of soup that I'll show you. I'll also show you how to make huevos rancheros with your freeze-dried eggs, beans, and vegetables. It's so tasty. I've got a recipe for instant pot butternut squash risotto. You can really use any vegetable you like in here, and it's super filling. My black bean soup is creamy and spicy and such a yummy recipe. And finally, my French onion gnocchi soup. It's so decadent and so delicious. I hope you enjoy these recipes, and as always, thanks for spending some time with me today. Welcome to the Freeze-Dried Foodie. My name's Kareth. Here you'll find delicious recipes that feature freeze-dried ingredients. Now, I use a lot of Thrive Life, but they've gone out of business, and you can use other brands in my recipes. Lots of us have food stores that we need to know how to cook with. On this channel, I'll show you how I cook with mine. The first recipe I have for you today is for my old-fashioned vegetable soup, and I'm going to actually show you 3 different flavors. You can kind of fill the jars with the vegetables of your choice and then put some seasonings in there. And then you could make 3 different versions. The first version would be like a tomato-based soup. It reminds me so much of the Campbell's vegetable soup that I grew up eating. The second version is a creamy soup. And then the third version is the cheesy soup. So I'm going to show you all 3 of those today. You're going to see me making 2 jars, and this video is old, you can probably tell. But basically what I'm doing is I'm filling them up with the vegetables that I like in my vegetable soup. It's totally up to you what veggies you use in your vegetable soups. Just so your jars are full, these recipes will work. By the way, I have the recipes written down in the description boxes of the original videos, and I will link to those below. So basically, my rule of thumb is for every 1 cup of jar that you fill up with vegetables, that is going to be about 1 serving. So if you want to serve 2 people, use a pint-sized jar. If you want to serve 3 people, which is what I was doing in this video, I used a 3-cup jar or a 1.5-pint jar. If you want to serve 4 people, then get a quart jar and fill it up. If you start a soup with a base of a mirepoix, you're not going to go wrong. Mirepoix is onions, carrots, and celery. So if I were you, if you have those things in freeze-dried form, use those at least in your vegetable soup, and then fill in with other vegetables that you like. Think potatoes, corn, zucchini, tomatoes, peas, butternut squash, anything like that. Just so your jar is full, I think your soup will be good. After you fill up your jar with whatever vegetables you like to put in there, and you've put some mashed potato flakes as a thickener, then pat down your jars. Because we're using freeze-dried ingredients, they have kind of a lot of give to them, so pat them down, and then you can fit the seasonings at the top. No matter what kind of soup you're making, whether it's going to be the tomato base or the cheesy one or the creamy one, they all need seasonings. My seasonings of choice are kosher salt, black pepper, parsley, and thyme. Everybody gets a little bit of those things, and then some bay leaves. But it's up to you. If you prefer other seasonings in your vegetable soups, go for it. Do whatever you like. Now, if I was going to make the tomato version, I would put these things in there next. I would put some beef bouillon, whatever kind you think tastes good. I would include some Espanol sauce. This is from Thrive Life, but I have the copycat recipe on my channel. And I would also include some tomato powder, because that's the flavor that comes through is tomato. That's going to taste like I had mentioned, kind of like a Campbell's. For the ones I'm making here, it's not going to be the tomato base. It's going to be a cheesy one, a creamy one. And with those, you need to add chicken bouillon, butter powder, sour cream powder, and then for the creamy soup, you add the bechamel sauce powder, of course, and then for the cheesy version, you add the cheese sauce powder. And I have copycat recipes of those on my channel as well. And then in go the bay leaves. I put oxygen absorbers in there because I was actually going to store those long term in my pantry storage. They were not going to get cooked immediately. So I went ahead and put some oxygen absorbers in there. And then I had those, like months later. But for this video, I went ahead and made up little pint-sized jars of all 3 of the flavors that I was telling you about. And I'm going to cook them for you in this video right here. So you can see what they look like when they cook and then what they look like at the end. All right, so I've got 3 different pots out and I'm going to show you all 3 soups. This first one here is the cheesy vegetable soup with that yummy cheese powder. This next one back in the back is the creamy vegetable soup. And the one in the front is the classic tomato-based vegetable soup. And to each of these, I add about 3 cups of water. These are pint-sized jars, and I'm just going to recommend, as a rule of thumb, to use about 1.5 times that amount of water. So these are the pint-sized jars, so I'm going to add 3 cups of water. If you were making the 1.5 pint size, then you might add about 4.5 cups of water. And if you're making the quart size, I would recommend probably 6 or 7 cups of water. So you just give those a stir, make sure the powders are incorporated, put the lids on, give them some heat, bring them up to a simmer, and then just give them a stir and let them simmer for probably 15 minutes. I usually bring them up to temperature at about a medium or a medium high, and then I turn the temperature down to a medium low. And then after about 15 minutes of cook time, this is what they look like. You see how the colors have deepened? It's darker. You can tell that the vegetables are tender. These are ready. It's ready after about 15 minutes of simmering. If you added some of the instant beans to any of these soups, they might take a little bit longer to cook, but they should be ready at about the same time that the vegetables are ready. So this cheesy version, I added a pinch of turmeric powder to make it a little bit more orange or yellow, and I think it turned out great. You can definitely add some fresh cheese to this if you like. Here's the creamy version, and it is just so nice. It thickened up. Those mashed potato flakes that we put in there really help to thicken up the sauces. You can add fresh cream if you like to that. Okay, so everybody's going to get a close-up of their own. Here's the tomato-based classic vegetable soup. Here is our creamy vegetable soup. And this one is the cheesy vegetable soup. Aren't they pretty? Each one was so different. This one, it reminded me so much of the vegetable soup I grew up on. The cheesy one, oh, it was so delicious. And the creamy one, it's just so comforting. Do I have a favorite? That would be really hard for me to say. I love them all. Do I plan to make them all again? Yes, I do, absolutely. I'm so glad I have those 2 on my shelf right now. Up next is my recipe for huevos rancheros. This is one of many recipes on my channel that feature eggs, but this one also has instant refried beans. But y'all, it's really all about the salsa. It's all about the ranchero sauce. It's fantastic. Huevos rancheros translates to ranch eggs. It's a cooked tomato salsa, and it's a fantastic sauce that's going to go on top of these eggs. Now, traditional huevos rancheros It's going to be an over easy egg or an over medium egg. And so when you cut into it, you get that nice runny egg yolk that mixes in with the sauce. Obviously, we're not going to be able to do that here. We're going to be using the scrambled egg mix instead, but it's still delicious. And the flavors are fantastic. Let me show you how I put this together. Y'all are going to love it. This recipe is going to require 2 jars. We're going to put the sauce ingredients in one jar and the beans and the eggs in the other jar. Into jar number 1, we're going to put a cup of the tomato dices, because this is a tomato salsa that we're making here. 1/4 cup of our onion slices. I do like to use the slices here because I like the chunkiness of the onion better than the little bitty tiny chopped onions, but you can use those if you like. All right, I'm going to include a tablespoon of the Lighthouse brand freeze-dried jalapenos, and you can use Thrive Life green chili peppers if you prefer. I'm also putting some chicken bouillon just for some depth of flavor. A little bit of sugar is going to help to balance out the acidity of the tomatoes, as well as some salt. I forgot to add it here, but you'll see me add it later. I'm also including tomato powder, freeze-dried cilantro, and some Thrive Life freeze-dried garlic. And that's all there is that goes into this ranchero sauce. But that's all you need because it's delicious, y'all. So tasty. All right, pint jar number 2, we'll put the eggs and the beans. So in the bottom of the jar, go ahead and put a cup of the refried beans, as well as some seasoning. Now I like the Goya adobo. And then in with those beans, I'm gonna add some pepper jack cheese, because why not? And I did blend that, like I pulsed it in the blender just so it would melt faster. You could use cheddar if you like. Let's put 1/2 cup of our scrambled egg mix into a baggie. We need to keep that separate because they cook separately. And then go ahead and season your eggs. I've got salt and pepper going into mine, but you can season your eggs however you like to season your eggs. Get that little baggie in the top of the jar there, seal it up, and then that's all that goes into the second jar. You can get an oxygen absorber in there and get your ring and your lid on. And if you like this kind of recipe, you could make up a couple of these jars at a time, have them on your pantry shelf for whenever you need them. But I do suggest you make this maybe on a Saturday, a weekend, just when you have a little bit more time, because it is more involved and it does take a little bit more effort, but boy, is it worth it, y'all. This is so good. First thing you'll need to do is add some water to that ranchero sauce jar. Get those tomatoes and those onions refreshing, rehydrating. Just empty the contents of that egg baggie into some sort of a bowl, and you can get some water in on them. You'll need 3/4 cup of water because it was 1/2 cup of eggs. So that's the proportion there. Stir it up and those will be ready for you. A small saucepan is all you're going to need for the beans, and about 3/4 cup of water, somewhere around in there. Just let those soak. You don't even have to turn the heat on yet. Just let them soak a little bit. All right, into a medium skillet, you can put a couple tablespoons of oil, and then go ahead and get some heat. Get that skillet and that oil nice and hot. Very carefully add that jar of ranchero sauce. And what you'll do here is basically you're just going to cook off the water that's in there. So you're cooking off that liquid, and once it's evaporated, then you'll be sauteing those ingredients. That's really where the flavors are going to happen. When you saute these tomatoes and onions and jalapenos or green chilies, like this is where the flavor develops, people. It's so much better than if you just had this as a raw salsa. Ranchero sauce is a cooked sauce, so definitely saute that 2-3 minutes. Get some fond on the bottom of your pot, and then add somewhere around a cup of water. And after you get that additional water added, you'll want to stir it really well because, yeah, you want to get up all the fond that's on the bottom of your skillet. you want that in your sauce, right? Fond equals flavor. So go ahead, spend a little time, scrape up whatever's stuck to the bottom of your skillet and get that into your sauce. There's where I added that salt I was talking about earlier. And then all you need to do is turn your heat down, probably medium-low. You'll need to simmer this covered for about 15 minutes. And while that simmers, get some heat going on your beans, stir them occasionally so they don't stick. After about 15 minutes, you can take off that lid and give your ranchero sauce a stir. And basically, you're just wanting to make sure those tomatoes and those onions are nice and tender and you have the flavor you want, okay? So go ahead and taste it and adjust it. You can always cook this longer if it needs to cook longer, or you could add more water and cook it, whatever it needs. Mine was perfect, so I went ahead and transferred that into a bowl, and I'm just gonna use that same skillet to cook my eggs. So I wiped it out with a paper towel, and then I put a little plate on top of that bowl to make sure my ranchero sauce stayed nice and warm. Okay, and then you'll want to turn your heat down. Make sure it's at a medium-low because you're about to scramble some eggs, okay? So I've got a tablespoon of butter in the bottom of that pan. I'm going to let that melt, and then I'm going to add those scrambled eggs. And the secret to great scrambled eggs is low and slow. You want low heat. I have mine on medium low. It's probably between a 2 and a 3 on my stove. But there's just something about the protein in eggs that it will seize up on you if you cook it at too high of a temperature. That's just the way eggs are. So the secret to nice and tender, fluffy eggs is a lower heat. Like lower than you think you would need, okay? So if you're at a medium, that's too high. Crank down your heat to about a medium low, and then make sure you stir it pretty often. I didn't really walk away. I just kept stirring that whole time. I wanted a soft scrambled egg. This is about how I like my eggs. So I'm gonna pull that off of the heat. That texture right there, that's gonna be perfect for huevos rancheros. Take a look at these beans. You see how thick they are at this point? This is what you're looking for. And doesn't that look amazing with that melted cheese in there? Go ahead and take those off the burner because they will continue to thicken after you pull them off. Now your huevos rancheros are ready to assemble. So I like to put them on a tostada, like a crispy tostada shell. You could definitely eat these without a tostada shell. You could put them on a corn tortilla, a flour tortilla, but traditionally I think they're on a crispy tostada shell. And this is how I assemble them. First, you gotta put down a layer of beans, and of course mine are cheesy beans. We've got great flavor in our refried beans because we put it in there, okay? If you've tried the refried beans and thought, oh, that's not great, it's because you didn't season them. They are literally just cooked pinto beans that have been smushed. So you have to add the seasonings. So just so they're nice and seasoned, they're gonna be perfect. And of course we put that pepper jack in there, which is amazing. All right, so down go the beans first, then go the scrambled eggs. And by the way, these scrambled eggs that I'm using in this recipe here, these are 3 years old. But you would never know it. They smell amazing, they look amazing, they taste amazing. That's the beauty of Thrive Life. Now comes the best part, the ranchero sauce. It is so tasty. It's really nice and warm. I like a good amount of juice in my ranchero sauce. So it's up to you, but I do like a lot of juice, and I love to serve this warm on top of the warm eggs and the warm beans. It's perfection, y'all. You will love this sauce. I'm adding some crumbly white cojita cheese here, as well as some sliced avocado. I like to put cilantro on this, and Oh my goodness, it's such a great breakfast. Isn't it beautiful too? And those blue plates that I like to put my Mexican food on, those are Fiesta ware plates. So I think it's just perfect for Mexican food. I think it pops. It's so pretty. It rained here all morning, so I did not have good lighting. And so these pictures are not the best. My video is not the best either, just because I don't have good lighting. Typically, I turn off all the lights in my house and I just open my blinds, and that's how I take my pictures. But today it was so dark outside, it was just dark in my house. So I had to put on all my lights. Oh well, that's just the way it goes sometimes. But the breakfast was excellent. This, y'all, is such a good breakfast. I hope you give it a try. I hope you love it. You have to let me know what you think in the comments below. Moving along, we've got a recipe for some butternut squash risotto. This is such a delicious recipe. I have made this with other vegetables. One of my favorites is a mushroom risotto. Now, even though this is typically a side dish, we eat it as a main dish oftentimes, and it's so satisfying. And I must note that this recipe is specifically for an Instant Pot or a pressure cooker. This is not a stovetop recipe. You actually have to have this piece of equipment for this recipe to work. So you are going to start with arborio rice. That's a specialty kind of rice, and that's just how you make risotto. And then you put in there our butternut squash. I've got some onions in there and a little Parmesan cheese, and then just some seasoning. So it's not a lot of ingredients. It will come together really fast because it's not too much to put into the jar. You're going to start with a pint-sized jar. And to that jar, you're going to add a cup of the arborio rice. It's this little fat grain of rice, and it makes for a very creamy end product. So that's how you make risotto. Now, I put about 2/3 of a cup, maybe 3/4 of a cup of butternut squash in there. You can try to get up to a cup of the squash. Mine were these really kind of big, chunky pieces. And then, try to squish it down a bit to be able to fit the other ingredients in there. So I've got a tablespoon of our chopped onions, and then an additional tablespoon of our green onions, and a tablespoon of our Parmesan cheese. If you don't have any of those things, you can always add that kind of fresh when you go to make it. And then I've got some of our freeze-dried garlic. That is sage right there. I think sage pairs really nicely with the butternut squash. And then that's half a tablespoon of our chicken bouillon powder. And then you're just going to add some seasonings. I put in salt and pepper and a dash of cayenne. I highly recommend some lemon powder. I think the lemon powder is great in there. If you have Thrive Life lemon powder, you can just put a teaspoon of that, or maybe a packet of that true lemon. And that's about it. You seal it up. This should stay good on your shelf for it just as long as your rice stays good, which I would think it would be fine for months or even years on your pantry shelf. This recipe is kind of like a guide. You can use this type of recipe for different flavor combinations. If you don't want to do butternut squash and sage, then do mushroom and thyme, or you could do asparagus and lemon. So when you go to prepare it, if you don't have an Instant Pot, then you can totally make this on the stovetop in a skillet, but you'll need to look up recipe instructions for making risotto on the stovetop. This recipe is specifically for an Instant Pot. You are going to utilize this saute function on your Instant Pot. There's a saute button on the front, and you definitely need it for this recipe. You're going to add a tablespoon of olive oil and then a tablespoon of butter. And basically you're just going to melt that butter in there and kind of coat the bottom of the pan with the oil. When you dump the contents of your jar in there, you're going to need to move quickly here, okay? All I'm wanting you to do is to coat those rice grains with the oil. But your garlic will burn if you don't almost immediately add your water. So before you do that, make sure you have 2.5 cups of water ready to be poured in. Yeah, you want to do that because you don't want to burn the garlic. If the garlic burns, it turns bitter and it kind of ruins the dish. So you can skip that whole step if you're uncomfortable with it. But I like to give the arborio rice grains a little bit of a coat in the oil. I think it improves the flavor. But anyway, that saute function is what's going to help this dish cook so quickly in your Instant Pot. You're going to bring everything to a boil before you use the pressure cooker function, right? So everything is up to a boil. You've given it a stir. Now close it. You'll want to turn off the saute function and then find the manual button, hit manual, and make sure it's set for 5 minutes. It will eventually turn on. Make sure it's closed so it reaches the pressure. It will go for 5 minutes and then just do a natural release for anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes of natural release. And I did mine 13, I think, and there just wasn't any pressure left to release really in there. So it's done. That's what it looks like. The squash should be tender. The rice should be tender. The liquid should be cooked into the dish. That's how everything gets tender. And then I like to add some mascarpone cheese. It's very similar to cream cheese. If you don't have mascarpone, you could add cream cheese to this. I think that it adds some really nice richness to it, some, I guess, creaminess to it. And if you don't have mascarpone or cream cheese, you could always add some more parm. And I always suggest taste it, see what it needs. I ended up adding some more salt here. But y'all, it was so creamy. It was so delicious. I really, really think you're going to like this recipe. This is a cheater version of risotto, right? We're using an Instant Pot here. Traditional risotto takes a long time on the stovetop. It might take 40 or 45 minutes, and you have to be there constantly because every 5 minutes or so you have to add broth and stir. And that is how you get that creamy texture from that arborio rice. So this cheater version is a lot simpler, but the flavor is really good. I do suggest that you add that mascarpone or that cream cheese just so you definitely have that creaminess that you expect from a risotto. Okay, up next, I've got my black bean soup. This version is filling and it's packed with flavor. Well, hi there, everyone. I've got another meal in a jar recipe for you today. This one is a just add water recipe. It's very simple to prepare, but oh so tasty. This recipe is for a black bean soup. And from what I understand, there's lots of different cultures that have a black bean soup. This is my take on it. It's got lots of vegetables, of course, black beans, and a little bit of spice. I'm using some jalapeno peppers from Lighthouse today. You could also use the Thrive Life green chili peppers. And the signature spice in there is cumin. So I'm using a good amount of cumin and just some other spices as well to help give this some flavor. It really is packed with flavor and it is very yummy. I'm starting with, it's a 24-ounce jar, but you can use a pint-sized jar. I was actually out of pint jars. I didn't have any clean ones, so I'm using a bigger jar, but this is all gonna fit in a pint-sized jar. I just wanted 2 or 3 servings. I'm using a cup of black beans, and then I took half a cup of black beans and put them in the blender and really blended them up really nicely to give me a different texture there. And then I'm going to put some green things in here. I've got some celery, the jalapenos I mentioned, as well as some cilantro. If you don't like cilantro, just leave that out. I'm also including some red bell peppers, and then I've got some tomato powder from Thrive. Now, the only ingredient in our tomato powder is tomatoes. I've got onions, garlic, and some carrots gonna go in here. And can't you tell it's gonna be delicious? It's got great ingredients. All right, here are the spices. Some salt and pepper, oregano, cumin, I mentioned that. Also, I've got some chicken bouillon powder and a little bit of Goya adobo. That is just an all-around, like an all-purpose seasoning, but it's found in the Hispanic section of my grocery store. It's got some garlic powder in there, some turmeric, and some other stuff like that. I'm going to include a few packets of that true lime. That's kind of optional. I like a little bit of that brightness in there, but if you don't like lime, just leave that out. Okay, so here's the jar that I'm going to store on my pantry shelf. And I think it's really pretty with the black beans at the bottom and the colorful vegetables in the middle. When you're ready to make this, you can get out a soup pot. I used kind of a medium or a medium large one. It wasn't too big. I didn't need it to be too big. Just remove those true lime packets and then empty the contents of the jar into your pot. And all you're going to do is add water here. You can add somewhere between 4 and 5 cups. I started with 4 and actually added a 5th later on, you'll see. Give it a good stir, and you want to bring this to a boil. I put it on medium-high heat to begin with. I did stir it occasionally. Once you get it to a boil, you can turn down that heat just a little bit. I landed at, I think it was a 5.5 out of 10 on my stove, just somewhere around a medium. You want to keep the boil going. You'll want to simmer this for somewhere around 15 or 20 minutes. Stir it from the bottom occasionally so you don't get any sticking on the bottom of your pot. The longer you cook it, the darker it will get and the thicker it will become. I taste tested my beans after about 15 minutes and mine were not tender enough. So I added an additional cup of water, so that's my 5th cup of water. And I stirred it, brought it back to a boil, and I simmered it for another 5 or 10 minutes. I think I ended up cooking this a total of somewhere between 25 and 30 minutes actually. I don't know how people are able to get the instant beans tender in less than that amount of time. I really don't know, but it seems to take my instant beans a long time to get tender. I know some people put them in a Mylar bag and just add boiling water and let it sit for 10 minutes and then they eat it. And I don't know how that works out because mine don't ever seem to be tender at that point. So anyway, cook it as long as you need to cook it. And then you can add your true lime. If you end up adding some more water, you might need to adjust your seasonings. I added a pinch of salt to mine. Now this is optional, okay? Because I already did blend some of those black beans. So that's going to give you a thickened texture. But I like mine even a little thicker and creamier. So I put my immersion blender in there and just blended it for, like, I don't know, a little blitz here and there for maybe 10 different times. And this is the texture I ended up with. It's a lot thicker, but it's not completely smooth. I mean, you can see there's still black beans in there. There's still peppers and onions and carrots. You can see all of that in there. Yeah, there we go. We have our black bean soup. Isn't it gorgeous? I just think it's so pretty. I like to top mine with avocado, cilantro, and sour cream. I also like to serve it with some tortilla chips. I actually forgot to put them on there to show you that. But I just think it's a gorgeous soup and it's so tasty. It's one of those soups that can really absorb any flavor you want to put in there. I know some people add chili powder. Other people will put meat in here. I think it would be great with meat. I think ground beef would be good in here, or even some chicken dices. Sausage would probably be good as well. I just think it would be delicious with whatever you want to do with it. I like it with, just the vegetarian version, just the black beans. But, that's up to you. It's really filling. And as you can see, it's pretty thick. It's really nice with the sour cream and the avocado. I think there are lots of different cultures that have their version of black bean soup. I know there's like Puerto Rican, there's Cuban, there's Spanish, Mexican, even Caribbean. So lots of different cultures have their version of black bean soup, and they probably put different things in the soup. But anyway, this is my version, and it is rather tasty. For my last recipe today, y'all, I've got a French onion gnocchi soup. It's just luxurious. It's topped with this cheese that you brulee, and it's filled with these pillowy soft potato dumplings. So good. I find my shelf-stable gnocchi in the pasta section of my local grocery store. I first saw the recipe on either All Recipes or Taste of Home. I can't remember, but I thought, ooh, that sounds yummy. And let me see if I can convert it into a shelf-stable recipe. And so that's what I've done here. It's kind of a cheater version of a French onion soup, because we're not caramelizing onions for 25 minutes here. And also it uses gnocchi instead of the bread round that gets bruleed at the end. There's gnocchi in there, and it is a rich soup. It's satisfying, and we are going to get some of those same yummy flavors, but just a little bit different here, okay? First of all, we're starting with a pint-sized jar, and I am putting 1/4 cup of butter powder in the bottom because that butter flavor is really important. And then the Espagnole sauce is going in. That's like a rich beef gravy kind of. It's a very good flavor in there. And I've got a copycat recipe on my channel if you need that. And the star of the recipe is the onion slices, of course. If you don't have those, you could use the chopped onions, but maybe cut the amount in half. The seasonings in here are very simple. Garlic, salt, pepper, and freeze-dried thyme. I use the Lighthouse brand of freeze-dried thyme. You could use dried thyme. You might cut that amount in half. All right, so not a lot of ingredients here. I am going to top this with cheese. And I don't have Gruyere that's freeze-dried, but I do have mozzarella. So I've got mozzarella and Parmesan in there. Don't worry if you don't have the Parmesan. The mozzarella is going to be good on its own. So these are the jars that you could keep stored on your pantry shelf. And be sure to store a package of that shelf-stable gnocchi next to your jars. Whenever you're ready to make this recipe, it's really easy. It is a just add water recipe, even though I have some optional add-ins here I'll show you in a minute. I would start with the mozzarella or the cheese jar. Add you some water to that jar and then just give it a good shake. You can refrigerate that while you cook the soup, and it will be refreshing or rehydrating as the soup cooks. That's a 2-quart soup pot I've got there. You just empty the jar into the pot and add about 6 cups of water. Give it a good stir and turn that heat to medium high. You'll want to bring this to a boil. And since this is not a traditional way of making French onion soup, I did add some sugar to the recipe, if you notice that, just because I miss the sweetness that comes from caramelizing the onions. So I did add that back in. I also added just a little bit of wine. Any kind of wine would do. I had just a little bit of white wine there. I think that flavor is a really nice addition, because in French onion soup, you traditionally put something like that in the soup. Now, once you bring it to a boil, you can go ahead and reduce your heat down to a medium or so. You do want to continue the boil, and you'll simmer this for about 20 minutes because you want your onions really nice and tender. Okay, every once in a while you might check on the cheese, give it a stir or a good shake. Mine was kind of sticking there on the sides and on the bottom, so I got my spoon in there and I decided to give it a good stir. But that water will be refreshing that cheese, and you want it completely refreshed by the time you top the soup with it, or else it'll just burn in the oven. So that's no bueno. Make sure it's good and rehydrated. All right, after about 20 minutes of simmering, you can add the package of gnocchi. And if you haven't had gnocchi before, it's a potato dumpling. It's a really soft and kind of pillowy little dumpling. And those are shelf stable, so I really do like using the gnocchi in my soups. You can just store the gnocchi alongside your jar. The gnocchi needs to cook for about 3 minutes, and as it cooks, it will float. It will rise to the top. And after about 3 minutes, it should be ready to serve up. You can taste it and check for seasonings. I added a pinch of salt to mine. You want to put your soup into an oven-safe ramekin and then top it with the cheese and brulee it or broil it for a few minutes. Get a little color on that. And then it's ready. Isn't it beautiful? I put just a sprinkling of thyme on the top. And y'all, it smelled so good. It's a very satisfying soup. Yeah, it's really delicious. All right, y'all, that's all I have for you for today. I hope you enjoyed these recipes for meatless meals. If you enjoy my recipes and would like to support my channel, the best way to do that is by purchasing a cookbook. I have digital versions available on my website and print paperback versions available on Amazon. I have 2 cookbooks at this time, and it's just full of recipes from my channel. And I really do appreciate every single purchase that helps me keep this channel going. All right, up next, I've got our verse of the day. And today's verse comes from the book of Romans, chapter 8 and verse 1, and it reads, "There is therefore now no condemnation for those of us who are in Christ Jesus." Praise God for that. All right, y'all, I hope you have a wonderful day, a blessed week, and until next time, y'all take care and keep thriving.